Hey, Squirrel Squad, I think I'm fresh this morning. We'll see. We're on chapter 4 called Through Flood and Field and Fire. And I don't even think I told y'all that yesterday. I was so tickled. Very early were they afloat again, and as they glided up the stream, Sylvia watched the earth's awakening, seeing in it what her own should be. The sun was not yet visible above the hills, but the sky was ready for his coming, with the soft flush of color dawn gives only to her royal lover. Birds were chanting matins as if all the jubilance of their short lives must be poured out at once. Flowers stirred and brightened like children after sleep. A balmy wind came whispering from the wood, bringing the aroma of pines, the cool breath of damp nooks, the healthful kiss that leaves a glow behind. Light mist floated down the river like departing visions that had haunted it by night, and every ripple breaking on the shore seemed to sing a musical good morrow. Sylvia could not conceal the weariness her long vigil left behind, and after betraying herself by a drowsy lurch that nearly took her overboard, she made herself comfortable and slept till the grating of the keel on a pebbly shore woke her to find a new harbor reached under the lee of a cliff, whose deep shadow was very grateful after the glare of noon upon the water. "How do you intend to dispose of yourself this afternoon, Adam?" asked Mark when dinner was over and his sister busy feeding the birds. "In this way," answered Warwick, producing a book and settling himself in a commodious cranny of the rock. "Moore and I want to climb the cliff and sketch the view, but it's too rough a road for Sylvia. Would you mind mounting guard for an hour or two? Read away and leave her to muse herself, only pray don't let her get into any mischief, by way of enjoying her liberty, for she fears nothing and is fond of experiments." "I'll do my best," replied Warwick with an air of resignation. Having slung the hammock and seen Sylvia safely into it, the climbers departed, leaving her to enjoy the luxury of motion. For half an hour she swung idly, looking up into the green pavilion overhead, where many insect families were busy with their small joys and cares, or out over the still landscape, basking in the warmth of a cloudless afternoon. Then she opened a book Mark had brought for his own amusement and began to read as intently as her companion, who leaned against the boulder, slowly turning his pages, with leafy shadows flickering over his uncovered head, and touching it with alternate sun and shade. The book proved interesting, and Sylvia was rapidly skimming into the heart of the story when an unguarded motion caused her swing to slope perilously to one side, and in saving herself she lost her book. This produced a predicament, for being helped into a hammock and getting out alone are two very different things. She eyed the distance from her nest to the ground and fancied it had been made unusually great to keep her stationary. She held fast with one hand and stretched downward with the other, but the book insolently flirted its leaves just out of reach. She took a survey of Warwick. He had not perceived her plight, and she felt an unwanted reluctance to call for help because he did not look like one used to come and go at a woman's bidding. After several fruitless essays, she decided to hazard an ungraceful descent, and gathering herself up was about to launch boldly out when Warwick cried, "Stop!" in a tone that nearly produced the catastrophe he wished to avert. Sylvia subsided, and coming up, he lifted the book, glanced at the title, then keenly at the reader. "Do you like this?" "So far, very much." "Are you allowed to read what you choose?" "Yes, sir. That is Mark's choice, however. I brought no book." "I advise you to skim it into the river. It's not a book for you." Sylvia caught a glimpse of the one he had been reading himself, and impelled by a sudden impulse to see what would come of it, she answered with a look as keen as his own, "You disapprove of my book? Would you recommend yours?" "In this case, yes, for in one you will find much falsehood in purple and fine linen, in the other some truth in fig leaves. Take your choice." He offered both, but Sylvia took refuge in civility. "I thank you, I'll have neither, but if you will please steady the hammock, I will try to find some more harmless amusement for myself." He obeyed with one of the humorous expressions which often passed over his face. Sylvia descended as gracefully as circumstances permitted and went roving up and down the cliffs. Warwick resumed his seat, and the barbaric yelp, but seemed to find truth in demi-toilet less interesting than youth in a grey gown and round hat, for which his taste is to be commended. The girl had small scope for amusement, and when she had gathered moss for pillows, laid out a white fungus to dry for a future pincushion, harvested pennyroyal in little sheaves, tied with grass blades, watched a battle between black ants and red, and learned the landscape by heart, she was at the end of her resources, and leaning on a stone surveyed earth and sky with a somewhat despondent air. "You would like something to do, I think." "Yes, sir. For being rather new to this sort of life, I have not yet learned how to dispose of my time." "I see that, and having deprived you of one employment, will try to replace it by another." Warwick rose, and going to the single birch that glimmered among the pines like a delicate spirit of the wood, he presently returned with strips of silvery bark. "You were wishing for baskets to hold your spoils yesterday. Shall we make some now?" he asked. "How stupid in me not to think of that. Yes, thank you, I should like it very much." And, producing her housewife, Sylvia fell to work with a brightening face. Warwick sat a little below her on the rock, shaping his basket in perfect silence. This did not suit Sylvia, for feeling lively and loquacious, she wanted conversation to occupy her thoughts as pleasantly as the birch rolls were occupying her hands. And there sat a person who, she was sure, could do it perfectly if he chose. She reconnoitered with covert glances, made sundry overtures, and sent out envoys in the shape of scissors, needles, and thread. But no answering glance met hers. Her remarks received the briefest replies, and her offers of assistance were declined with an absent "no thank you." Then she grew indignant at this seeming neglect, and thought as she sat frowning over her work behind his back, "He treats me like a child. Very well, then I'll behave like one, and beset him with questions till he is driven to speak, for he can talk, he ought to talk, he shall talk." "Mr. Warwick, do you like children?" she began with a determined aspect. "Better than men or women. Do you enjoy amusing them?" "Exceedingly, when in the humor." "Are you in the humor now?" "Yes, I think so." "Then why don't you amuse me?" "Because you're not a child." "I fancied you thought me one." "If I had, I probably should have put you on my knee and told you fairy tales, or cut dolls for you out of this bark, instead of sitting respectfully silent and making a basket for your stores." There was a curious smile about Warwick's mouth as he spoke, and Sylvia was rather abashed by her first exploit, but there was pleasure in the daring, and choosing another topic, she tried again. "Mark was telling me last night about the great college you had chosen. I thought it must be a very original and interesting way to educate oneself, and wanted very much to know what you had been studying lately. May I ask you now?" "Men and women," was the brief answer. "Have you got your lesson, sir?" A part of it very thoroughly, I believe. Would you think me rude if I ask which part? The latter. And what conclusions do you arrive at concerning this branch of the subject? Asked Sylvia, smiling and interested. That it is both dangerous and unsatisfactory. He spoke so gravely, looked so stern, that Sylvia obeyed a warning instinct and sat silent till she had completed a canoe-shaped basket, the youthful size of which produced a sudden longing to fill it. Her eye had already spied a knoll across the river covered with vines, and so suggestive of berries that she now found it impossible to resist the desire for an exploring trip in that direction. The boat was too large for her to manage alone, but an enterprising spirit had taken possession of her. And having made one voyage of discovery with small success, she resolved to try again, hoping a second in another direction might prove more fruitful. Is your basket done, sir? She asked. Yes, will you have it? Why, you have made it as an Indian would, using grass instead of thread. It's much more complete than mine, for the green stitches ornament the white bark, but the black ones disfigure it. I should know a man made your basket and a woman mine. Because one is ugly and strong, the other graceful but unable to stand alone? Asked Warwick, rising with a gesture that sent the silvery shreds flying away on the wind. One holds as much as the other, however, and I fancy the woman would feel her sooner if she had had the wherewithal to do it. Do you know there are berries on that hillside opposite? I see vines, but consider fruit doubtful, for boys and birds are thicker than blackberries. I've a firm conviction that they have left some for us, and as Mark says you like frankness, I think I shall venture to ask you to row me over and help me fill the baskets on the other side. Sylvia looked at him with a merry mixture of doubt and daring in her face, and offered him his hat. Very good, I will, said Warwick, leading the way to the boat with an alacrity which proved how much pleasanter to him was action than repose. There was no dry landing place just opposite, and as he rowed higher, Adam fixed his eyes on Sylvia with a look peculiar to himself, a gaze more keen than soft, which seemed to search one through and through with its rapid discernment. He saw a face full of contradictions, youthful, maidenly, and intelligent, yet touched with the unconscious melancholy which is born of disappointment and desire. The mouth was sweet and tender as a woman's should be, the brow spirited and thoughtful, but the eyes were by turns eager, absent, or sad. But there was much pride in the carriage of the small head, with its hair of wavy gold gathered into a green snood, whence little tendrils kept breaking loose to dance upon her forehead or hang about her neck. A most significant but not beautiful face, because of its want of harmony. The dark eyes among their fair... I lost my place. I hate that. Dark eyes among their fair surroundings disturbed the sight, as a discord in music jars upon the ear. Even when the lips smiled, the somber shadow of black lashes seemed to fill them with a gloom that was never wholly lost. The voice, too, which should have been a girlish treble, was full and low as a matured woman's, with now and then a silvery ring to it, as if another and a blither creature spoke. Sylvia could not be offended by the grave penetration of this glance, though an uncomfortable consciousness that she was being analyzed and tested made her meet it with a look intended to be dignified, but which was also somewhat defiant, and more than one smile passed over Warwick's countenance as he watched her. The moment the boat glided with a soft swish among the rushes that fringed the shore, she sprang up the bank and, leaving a basket behind her by way of hint, hurried to the sandy knoll, where to her great satisfaction she found the vines heavy with berries. As Warwick joined her, she held up a shining cluster, saying with a touch of exultation in her voice, "My faith is rewarded. Taste and believe." He accepted them with a nod and said pleasantly, "As my prophecy has failed, let us see if yours will be fulfilled." "I accept the challenge," and down upon her knees went Sylvia among the vines, regardless of stains, rents, or wounded hands. Warwick strolled away to leave her claim free, and silence fell between them, for one was too busy with thorns, the other with thoughts, to break the summer stillness. Sylvia worked with as much energy as if a silver cup was to be the reward of success. The sun shone fervently, and the wind was cut off by the hill. Drops gathered on her forehead and her cheeks glowed. But she only pushed off her hat, thrust back her hair, and moved on to a richer spot. Vines caught her by sleeve and skirt, as if to dishearten the determined plunderer. But on she went with a wrench and a rip, an impatient and a nasty glance at damaged fabrics and fingers. Lively crickets flew up in swarms about her. Surly wasps disputed her right to the fruit, and drunken bees blundered against her as they met, zigzagging homeward, much the worse for blackberry wine. She never heeded any of them, though at any other time she would have gladly made friends with all of them. But found compensation for her discomforts in the busy twitter of sand swallows perched on the mullein tops, the soft flight of yellow butterflies, and the rapidity with which the little canoe received its freight of Ethiop sweets. As the last handful went in, she sprung up crying, "Done," with a suddenness that broke up the long parliament and sent its members skimming away as if a second "No" had appeared among them. "Done," came back Warwick's answer like a deep echo from below, and hurrying down to meet him, she displayed her success, saying archly, "I'm glad we both won, though to be perfectly candid, I think mine is decidedly the fullest." But as she swung up her birch pannier, the handle broke, and down went the basket, berries and all, into the long grass, rustling at her feet. Warwick could not restrain a laugh at the blank dismay that fell upon the exultation of Sylvia's face, and for a moment she was both piqued and petulant, her mind disappointed. Doggone it. Exultation of Sylvia's face, and for a moment she was both piqued and petulant, hot, tired, disappointed, and hardest of all, laughed at. It was one of those times that try girls' souls, but she was too old to cry, too proud to complain, too well bred to resent, so the little gust passed over unseen, she thought, and joining in the merriment, she said as she knelt down beside the wreck, This is a practical illustration of the old proverb, and I deserve it for my boasting. Next time I'll try to combine strength and beauty in my work. To what? To wise people, character is betrayed by trifles. Warwick stopped laughing, and something about the girlish figure in the grass, regathering with wounded hands a little harvest lately lost, seemed to touch him. His face softened suddenly as he collected several broad leaves and spread them on the grass, and sitting down by Sylvia looked under her hat. And sitting down, looked under her hat brim with a glance of mingled penitence and friendliness. Now, young philosopher, pile up your berries in that green platter while I repair the basket. Bear this in mind. When you work and bark, make your handle the way of the grain, and choose a strip both smooth and broad. Then, drawing out his knife, he fell to work, and while he tied green withes as if the task were father to the thought, he told her something of a sojourn among the Indians, of whom he had learned much concerning their woodcraft arts and superstitions, lengthening the legend till the little canoe was ready for another launch. With her fancy full of war trails and wampum, Sylvia followed to the riverside, and as they floated back, dappled her stained fingers in the water, comforting their smart with its cool flow till they swept by a landing place, when she asked wonderingly, "Where are we going now? Have I been so troublesome that I must be taken home?" "We're going to get a third course to follow the berries, unless you're afraid to trust yourself to me." "Indeed I'm not. Take me where you like, sir." And I must stop right there, because we've read a little over 20 minutes. Let's see how much longer this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, about 20 more pages. So we'll get that tomorrow, and oh my gosh, be quiet. Thought I had that turned off. Okay, y'all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day, and if you would, keep all the folks in our prayer list in mind and in your prayers, hopefully. And I'm a little nervous about I'm not nervous about having a pap smear. I haven't had one in ages, and who likes to have those? But I'm a little nervous about the results. And I shouldn't be. I've prayed about it. And then, too, I've got to have a colonoscopy. That appointment's the consultation either later on this week or next week. But if you would help pray with me that the results turn out great for the pap smear and the upcoming colonoscopy, too. I'd be so forever beholden to you. And I always pray for my whole squirrel squad. Love to you all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Love you. Bye.